Welcome to the Bad Boss Journal, the dope podcast where you can anonymously say exactly what you think about your bad boss, toxic work environment, and find out how to handle it.
Welcome to another episode of the Bad Boss Journal. My name is Michelle, and I'm usually here with Ava, but Ava's been very, very busy at work, so I'm going to be hosting alone today. However, I have an amazing guest today. Her name is Sabrina Victoria. Hi, Sabrina.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for asking. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. I'm so glad. When Ava sent me your information, I was like, yes, especially since as we're, wrapping up the season, I really wanted to do episodes that would give people hope and give people resources on how to move past situations. But again, when I heard about your story, like it's very different, right, from the average bad boss story. But I feel like it should be heard because I have actually had friends who were in similar experiences. So yeah, do you want to just start it off and tell us your bad boss story?
Yeah, 100%. So my story started with a relationship. I
Mm-hmm.
was kind of tippy-toeing around dating a guy, wound up falling into that relationship. I fell into that relationship when I was a really, really bad spot financially. Was a
Mm,
recent single mom. My son was probably like maybe 8 or 9 months old. I was living paycheck to paycheck. I had eviction notices on my apartment door.
mm,
My car was being repoed out of the parking lot. And this guy just kind of came in and swooped me up. And I thought
mm.
I had won the lottery. I thought
Right.
God was saving me. And
Mm-hmm.
I very quickly fell into a relationship with him and very quickly moved in with him. And within a short time of moving in with him, he convinced me, kind of on a sly way, to quit my job and to start working for him.
Oh wow.
So, it wasn't like you must quit your job. It was kind of like glorified. We're going to make
Mm,
so much money together and it's going to be so amazing and we're going to build an empire and we're going to be able to retire early. And all we have to do is just work really hard. You're a hard worker. I'm a hard worker and we're going to make millions. And
mm.
I fell for it hook, line, and sinker. I'm a
I mean, but
super
to be
hard
fair
worker.
though, like I think when you just hear the outside appearances of that makes sense, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, 100%. So I quit my job and I quit my
Mm-hmm.
job without asking how much money he was going to pay me. And this is where
Mm,
the kicker kind of comes in is I quit my job. I started in the office at his office and I worked for day 1 and day 2 and day 3 and day 4 all the way up to day 14, day
mm-hmm.
17, no pay. And eventually my last paycheck came and went. I had no money. I had a bill coming up. And I went to him, 2, 3 weeks into working and was like,
Right.
we haven't talked about pay. Just put me in a really uncomfortable situation. I was
Right.
so desperate for anything because I
Mm,
just needed to pay. I was a
right.
single mom.
Yeah.
I had a child. And so, which I don't know if I mentioned that,
Yeah, you
but
did.
so he told me he was going to pay me $250 a week living in Chicago,
Wow.
which he's like, you're not paying for rent and you're not paying for utilities, which is true, right?
Mm-hmm.
But everything else, my car, my phone, my child, daycare, everything. So at the end of every month, I was broke,
Oh
basically.
my gosh.
So I did this for a very long time. I did this for years. And at one point, he gave me a raise of $50, so I was making $300 a week. And the relationship was extremely toxic. It was extremely stressful. There was emotional abuse, sexual abuse,
Mm-hmm.
obviously financial abuse, mental
Mm,
abuse. It was horrible. 8 years in, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I opened
mm-hmm.
up a secret bank account. I opened up a secret storage unit. I started an online business on eBay, OfferUp, Fiverr.com, and I
Wow.
just started
Mm-hmm.
slinging anything to pull in cash into my secret bank account.
Mm-hmm.
It took me 4 years. It's a whole long story, but it took me 4 years to get out.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to collect $50,000 and I left that
Wow.
relationship. However, when I left that relationship, I'm still like, I don't have a job. I'm
Mm-hmm.
still like scared. I don't
Right.
know. I'm tippy toeing. The whole time he was telling me I'll never make it on my own. So I stayed working for him for another 2 years after that. And it
Wow.
was a nightmare. It was an absolute nightmare. When
Yeah,
you
how does
say,
that work when you're with somebody in a relationship? You end that relationship, but you continue working with them and they're your boss.
yeah, so he was, and I hate to say this because it's not diagnosed, but he had every trait of a narcissist.
Mm,
He's never been diagnosed as a narcissist. That's my diagnosis. But if
yeah.
you look it up, he has all 126,
Right.
whatever,
Right.
of what that
Right.
is. And the relationship itself was just extremely toxic. I was addicted to him. He was addicted to me.
Mhm.
I was running the entire business at this point. I had taken him from the beginning when we first started working. He was making
Mhm.
around 200 to 300,000 a year. And by the
Mhm.
time I left him, we were pulling in 1 million. So I
Wow.
had done the majority of that, working
Mm.
my butt off the entire time. And I didn't want to leave it. It was my baby. But
Yeah.
when I left, or I mean when I left the relationship and I showed up that next Monday, it was harassing constantly, out to get me constantly. Everything was wrong. He was micromanaging
Oh,
me like crazy. He was embarrassing me in front of everybody.
God.
It was to the point where he was hurting his own company in order to hurt me. I mean, the
Wow.
cycle was just insane. It was absolutely insane.
Man. I feel like going through that for a couple of months is hard enough, but 2 years.
2 years. Yeah. At a year and a half, I couldn't take it anymore.
Mhm.
I sat him down. I said, "Hey, listen, I'm not capable of doing this anymore." I thought that if I left the relationship, I would be able to work just with you.
Mm.
And I can't. Like, I'm sorry. It's not going to work. I'm going to give you a 6 month notice. I'll give you
Mhm.
6 months. We need to find somebody to take over all the stuff that I do because I'm literally,
Mhm.
he didn't even know the passwords to his own bank accounts. Like, that's
Oh,
how much I
wow.
was running
Yeah.
his company.
Mhm.
So I started bringing girls in,
Mhm.
interviewing them. Hey, how about this one? This one's got a lot of qualifications. This one's
Mhm.
very outgoing. This one has whatever. No, 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 not good enough, not good enough, not good enough. Finally, 2 months in, so 4 months left, I tell
Mhm.
him, hey, listen, I don't know what kind of game you're playing here, but like if we don't find a replacement, I am leaving
Mhm.
in 4 months. Like I'm seriously doing this.
Right.
So you can play all the games you want and tug at me and pull at me and laugh at me behind my back
Mhm.
and whatever. But I'm literally leaving in 4 months. I don't care. So you need to bring
Mhm.
someone in. So he decided to bring in his girlfriend
Oh,
of
boy.
2 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
Girlfriend, I want to say 2 weeks, maybe it was 4 weeks. I don't know, weeks in. Very pretty girl, same age, very similar everything,
Mm.
right?
Oh, creepy.
Yes, she comes in super sweet. However, her story
Mhm.
so similar to my story when him and I first met. So she has no money. Her car
Mhm.
is broken down. She's not even a citizen of the United States.
Oh,
She can
goodness.
barely speak English. She was speaking very broken English. You could understand her, but
Right.
very broken English and just in complete turmoil, needed a savior.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I felt horrible and I still feel guilty about this,
Mm.
but she came in. She
Mhm.
came in, I played the role, I taught her everything I knew. Eventually,
Mhm.
she found out that him and I had a past. He didn't even tell her that. But just through
Nice.
conversation of employees and me, and I
Oh,
didn't know, she didn't know.
right.
She comes in one day freaking out, not necessarily at me, but freaking out, like crying because she just found this out. She felt completely lied to. A few other like triangulations within the
Mhm.
relationship between him, me, and her, and other employees. I wound up leaving like 2 weeks early. I put in my notice and I said, I did the best I could. Like,
Mhm.
I'm not going to get pulled into this absolute
Mhm.
nightmare anymore. I'm out. And I left and literally zero communication. Zero communication. I just
Not
walked out.
surprising, but annoying, you know? It's unfortunate, but it's not surprising with people like that.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. But everything worked out to my favor. I had spent enough time learning so much when it
Mhm.
comes to business. I had saved up a ton of money during
Mhm.
that time. One of the negotiations in me staying was to be able to use one of the vehicles. So he gave
Mhm.
me the crappiest van on the lot. He gave me like a 2007 Toyota Sienna with like rust on it. The air conditioning didn't work. I'm living in South Florida.
Ugh.
But I didn't care. I didn't care. I drove that thing and I just was stacking cash
Mhm.
between that business and all of my side businesses. And I never had to go back to a regular job after that.
Mm.
So, yeah, I think a lot of our experiences that suck,
Mhm.
we can learn from them. We can learn
Oh
from.
yeah.
Sometimes we have to dig in deep.
100%.
Sometimes we have to dig in
Yeah.
deep. But
Yeah. If you felt like you can kind of do this over again, are there things that you feel like you would do a bit differently? Not saying that, like, we all regret our lives or anything, but sometimes, there are things where you're like, oh, yeah, if I had known better, I would have done this, X, Y, and Z, or whatever the case may be.
yeah, actually, I wish I would have known how much power I had earlier.
Mm,
That's a huge regret of mine. I viewed myself for years as being this person with no abilities because that's what he told me
yeah.
over and over again. But in
Right.
actuality, I had so much power. I held all the power
Mm-hmm.
because I was running at like within probably 2 years. I had fully taken over everything. We had gone from Illinois, and I'm big picture. I'm like constantly, like even now when I'm on my own, like I'm
Mm-hmm.
going big, I'm going wide. So I brought that vision to him. He was just like
Mm-hmm.
working out of his house. He met
Right.
me. We got a huge office. We wound up opening up offices in Ohio, which I was running. We opened up offices in Pennsylvania, which I was running. Then we
Wow.
wound up in
That's amazing.
Florida, three offices or three separate sales sections in Florida. And I was running all of them simultaneously. He didn't even know
Mm,
what was going on. But I still was feeling like not doing, because this is what he was telling me, not doing enough,
mm,
not organized, not educated, incapable. I don't have any money because he had all the money. So his
right.
whole thing was, how much money do you have? Like, who do you think you are? You have no money. So he would use it against
Mm,
me all the time. But in actuality, I had all of the power. So I wish
right.
I would have used that to be able to negotiate more money. I
Mm,
wish I would have used that to be able to negotiate just more things in general, a
mm,
vehicle, gas, insurance, whatever it was. And I didn't. I was too scared. And even when I left the relationship,
mm-hmm.
I wish I would have, because to keep me on after our
Mm-hmm.
relationship, I did negotiate. But now looking back from where he was to where I took him financially,
Mm-hmm.
I was playing it conservative. I was playing a little
Right.
scared. So yeah, that's probably
That's
my
hard
my
though.
one regret.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, but that's the thing, right? Like all the things you said totally make sense in terms of how you handled it that time, right? Even me now, knowing what I know and going through what I've gone through in my life, I still second guess myself, right? And I know like the one thing I've tried to remind myself every single day is listen to your gut because my gut has never been wrong my entire life,
Yeah.
but there's something in me that is constantly questioning me.
Yeah.
And well, like what you said, like we have so much power, but I wonder where that comes from. I don't know if it's specifically like a woman, girl related thing or if it's people in general, but like, the fact that I constantly, like, I know that I have power,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And yet I don't.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's constantly this thing where I'm having to reteach myself, oh yeah, no, like remember, Michelle, like you know what you're doing. You
Yeah.
are, you are powerful. You know what to do. And I don't know if it's something that we grow up with. Like, do you feel like you were
Yeah.
like that before you met him?
Yes and no, but yeah, the reason he was able to do that to me was because of where I was. So I was just
Right.
like she was in the same spot. So you're
Hmm.
desperate. He purposely
Yeah.
found women who were desperate so that he could take advantage of them
Yeah.
and take advantage of them. The girl after me couldn't even get a check. So the whole time she was working with me, she told me a couple times he did the same thing to her. She's like, I don't
Oh
even know
my
what I'm getting
gosh.
paid. Like he just throws me $100 here and there because he could, because she was so desperate for anything. And that's the same
Right.
thing that I went through. And those are the type of people, there are bosses out there like that. They're looking
Yeah.
for people that they can just take advantage of.
But
And you
that
have to
sounds
be
very like
careful.
sociopathic narcissist, you know?
It is.
Like, yeah, they don't care. And, like all they care, it's like the me, 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 but they also know how to target and abuse
Yeah.
people to
Yeah.
their advantage.
Yep. Very
Oh,
manipulative
that
and
sickens
very
me.
charismatic, very charismatic. Compliments you, tells you, certain things to just make you feel
Mm-hmm.
good about yourself. So you
Right.
want to be around him.
Right.
And then just switches in a second, just switches in a second. And the people that were most susceptible to this switch were the people that were
Mm-hmm.
the closest to him. So
Mm.
me and maybe
Yeah.
like the two, yeah, sales managers or whatever that
Mm-hmm.
were around him the most were the ones that got the brunt of his temper, I guess.
Mm.
But I was the shield a lot of times, and that's one of the things that I wonder about as far as her goes. I was really good at shielding him from all of his employees or all of
Mm.
his sales force. So, he would go off on me and
Mm-hmm.
just freak out. And then I would relay the message back to
Mm.
everybody in a calm manner.
Right.
So, anybody who got that wrath from him quit immediately.
Mm.
Immediately quit. And that's one of the things. Once I finally did leave, my assistant, who became her assistant,
Mm-hmm.
left within 2 weeks.
Oh
The
wow.
accounting girl left probably within a month. His top installer probably left within 2 months,
Mm.
because he kept taking his wrath that was mine and
Mm-hmm.
throwing it onto the next person in line.
Mm.
And
Right.
they all wound up leaving. So I can't even imagine where they are now,
How
financially.
do you even take that? Like, I just I had an experience with a really toxic boss and I could not stand it. And I feel like now, but granted, I did suck it up a lot in the past, right? But like, I'm at a point where I'm like, I'm too old for this,
Yeah.
you know? But yeah, I don't know how you handled all that. That is so much stress, like dealing with somebody's like wrath like that all the
Yeah.
time
Yeah.
and then having to process it for others and protect others.
Yeah. And it was desperation. You have to remember, I had no money.
Right.
So if you have no other alternative, the part that I left out was, I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness. So when
Okay.
I got pregnant, I wasn't
Mhm.
married. So because I wasn't married, I was
Right.
disassociated from my entire family, my
Oh
entire
no.
church, everybody left. So I was all by myself. So he was the only person
Mhm.
that I could go to. And when the abuse and all of that started pretty early on, there was red flags all over the place.
Mm.
But when it actually really started, probably maybe 8 months to a year in, I'm already
Mhm.
I'm already almost living
Right.
there. I couldn't reach out to anybody to even know that what I was going through was inappropriate.
Right.
I'm young. I'm freaking like
Yeah.
20 or 21 years old. Like, how many jobs
Yeah.
have I had? I've worked at like the grocery store. I worked at
Yeah.
like one other sales office. I don't know what I'm
Mhm.
doing. And that's what
Yeah.
they do a lot of times. These narcissistic bosses, they tend to prey on people that they can use and manipulate, people who are
Mhm.
loving and caring, and people who are young.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. So, if you met somebody in a similar situation as you, what advice do you feel like you could give them?
Well, it would depend on their financial situation. If
Mm.
they were in my same situation, I would tell them to do exactly what I did,
Mhm.
and that is to find side hustles. I literally, while I was working for him still,
Mhm.
this sounds crazy, but in order to stabilize myself, to feel stable enough to leave,
Mhm.
I would work for him full time.
Mhm.
Then I had my side hustles. Then at 10 o'clock at night, for real, at 10 o'clock
Mhm.
at night, my son is sleeping. He's like 13 or 14.
Mhm.
So please no judgment. I
No
would leave
judgments at all.
thank you. I would leave my house around 10 o'clock at night and I would
Mhm.
drive around my neighborhoods nearby on trash
Mhm.
day. And I would pick up anything and everything of value until literally 1 o'clock or
Mm.
2 o'clock in the morning. I would just keep making rounds, dump it in my driveway, keep making rounds, dump it in my driveway, keep making rounds, dump it in my driveway.
Mhm.
I'd put everything in my house or my garage. The next
Mhm.
morning, I'd wake up early. So I'm literally on 3 to 4 hours of sleep,
Right.
taking pictures of everything, then going to work with him in the office and just
Mm.
sporadically throughout the day listing things on either eBay or OfferUp. And
Mhm.
I did this for 2 years. I was making
Wow.
probably around 2 grand or more a month
Mhm.
just doing that.
That's amazing.
It was crazy. It was
I
absolutely
mean,
crazy.
that is like on another level of hustle.
Yeah.
Like,
But you
when you're that's amazing. Like, to me, I'm just like, hats off to you because that is not easy.
no, it was
And the amount, and like, it really pains me because I can just imagine how desperate you felt to have
so
to do
desperate.
all of that. Like,
Yeah.
every single thing you could get your hands on. Like, that's just, it's so heartbreaking and yet so amazing that you were able to just overcome everything no matter what.
Yeah.
You
I
chose.
and one of the reasons why the main reason why is because every day I was with him
Hmm.
before I left the relationship and when I left the relationship, he told me every day that I was incapable. You're incapable of
Ugh.
doing it on your own. You need me. You can't do it. You can't make it. You're gonna fail. One of the lines that I repeat often to kind of mock him is he
Hmm.
told me that within 2 months of me leaving him, he was gonna find me in the back of a dumpster living in a cardboard box. And I was
Holy
so
crap.
frightened to fail that
Hmm.
I had to do anything and everything to make sure
Yeah.
that that never ever happened, that I never ever had to call him again, that I
Hmm.
never ever had to beg again, that I never ever had to wish that I
Hmm.
hadn't left. I didn't want there to be any thought ever that
Hmm.
where I was at that point was better than where I am now. I
Yeah.
never wanted that.
And I think it's interesting because when, like, how you always hear like fear is a bad thing or fear is negative, especially with like a lot of, like law of attraction folks and whoever, right? Like,
Yeah,
everybody thinks of fear as a negative thing. And I don't think people realize that when you hit this form of like trauma that is so unbearable,
yeah,
fear becomes the best motivator ever,
yeah,
right? So, I mean, the thing I'm going to talk about now has like nothing to do with like the whole, bad boss incident, but like, me and my family had to do a GoFundMe a couple years ago because my husband got really sick and we were living paycheck to paycheck and we didn't have the money. And we were like at a point where we were trying to keep it a secret from everyone. Only our family knew what was happening with him. And we got to a point where we're about to lose our house. And we're like, my sister was like, no, you need to do a GoFundMe. And while it was the most gratitude I ever felt for humanity in a sense, it was also the worst time in my entire life. It was mortifying. I felt naked. I felt judged, especially because there were other things going on at that time where
yeah.
people were, most people were very kind about the GoFundMe, and then there were others that were not. You
Wow.
know, yeah, and they were not thinking it's fake or anything, but they were like judging me for asking for help,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Meanwhile, I'm about to lose my house. I have 3 children.
Wow.
They don't really know what's going on because we don't want to scare them,
Yeah,
but yeah, like that fear of having done that, like after that happened, I was like, never again over my dead body will I ever take money from other people unless, like, and I was like, I can't ever do that and feel that way and have those people talk to me in that way
yeah,
ever. And I
yeah,
felt like I lost so much power that, like, yeah, I was like, never again. And I hustled, I worked, I did multiple jobs at a time to get to a point where, I learned how to trade stocks. I never thought I could do that, and like, yeah,
Yes.
and I was able to like, we basically survived off of me making income on stocks,
Wow.
like during the pandemic and everything. And, like, people are always just like, "Oh yeah, you're so lucky," and this and that. And I'm like, you have no idea. Like, you sometimes the fear helps.
Yeah.
It gets you out of that, that level of life that you've been living where it's just like it's uncomfortable and yet it's comfortable because you know it, right? And
Exactly.
trying to like get past that is so hard. But
Yeah.
sometimes fear is the thing that just lights that fire under you and pushes you out.
Yeah. No, I totally know what you're talking about. I've heard that before as far as you don't want to be pushing, you want to be just like flowing with it or whatever.
Mm,
But because of the fear, you never want it to be coming from a negative spot or else you're never going to get
right.
anywhere. And I agree with you. I agree with you.
Hmm.
And I lead that way also, that a lot of times fear, frustration, that is
Hmm.
what fuels me
Yeah.
sometimes, in some
Yeah.
situations. And it hasn't done anything ill to me by
Hmm.
taking that and using that as fuel to, project myself forward.
Yeah. And as long as you're not living in fear, that's the difference, right? Like there's certain aspects of your life where in order to get past that comfort level that you've been in or that bubble that you've kept yourself in and you're trying to pass it, sometimes you need something. But, I'm not saying that you should live in fear, right? Or think of everything as fearful because I
Yeah,
think that can definitely be a detriment. I know people who live like that
good
and
point. Good
it's
point.
all for the wrong reasons
You're
too,
right.
right? It's like
Yeah,
the most asinine things that they're fearful of
yeah,
and it just stops their life in their tracks. But when you use it as almost like this recipe to really burn, fuel that fire in you to get you to where you need to be. But I think that's also why so many people who end up like life coaches and business coaches and just coaches in general or therapists is like you have been through something,
yeah,
right? And sometimes like you really will never know what it's like until you've been through it, right? Like
exactly.
you can't get to that precipice until you've been through something to
Yeah,
that point where you never want to go back.
I agree. And this sounds, people might not appreciate this comment, but I don't really trust a therapist or a coach who hasn't been through something.
Mm,
When I meet a coach
thank
that's
you.
just like, I'm just very nice and I just really love people and I just want to give back, it's not the same. It's
Yeah.
not the same. You have to have, to me,
Hmm.
doesn't mean anything. It it's worth exactly how much you paid for it. Zero. You
Mm,
know. But to
yeah.
me, if you haven't gone through anything, some people haven't gone through much. For
Yeah.
real. They just haven't.
Yeah.
You can't you don't understand. You can't get it.
Yeah. And I can understand that there are some coaches out there or people in general who are good at their job because they're very empathic. But I've noticed, I know what you mean because I literally was talking to somebody like who was a therapist and I was telling them like what's been going on with me currently, right?
Yeah.
Because this health thing is like, it's been ongoing. So I was talking to them and kind of telling them all these things that just started happening all at once because that's just the way my life works. Like when I get, funny enough, when I get like narcissistic people that come into my life, something, I don't know what. And then like, I really try not to think that I'm an empath. I mean, not that, I don't know. Like I kind of have, I'm kind of bordering in between like the whole concept of empaths, right?
Okay.
Because like some people believe that like the empath thing is the whole concept that like you're so traumatized that you can feel other people's things, which makes sense, right?
Yeah, yeah, okay. Yeah.
But yeah, like I was talking to somebody and I could tell that person had no idea what I was going through. They knew the right words, right? Like they were like, yeah, that sounds really hard. And like sometimes if you need therapy just to hear somebody tell you like that sounds really hard and you don't want to bother your friends with like the constant, issues that you
Yeah,
have,
yeah, yeah.
that's great. But yeah, I do understand what you mean because I think even for me, and I've been coaching and like helping like consult with businesses and people in general. And like I think knowing where they've been gives you like you are not only helping to kind of take on that hurt to help them through it, but like you have advice that could actually work. That's what I've noticed.
Yeah, I agree
People
with
who've
that.
been through it has like a variety of ways to go about an issue. Whereas if you don't really know, you I don't know. Like I do understand what you mean though. It's funny because I have a friend who used to be like that with like birth doulas. She was like, I don't want a birth doula that hasn't had a child. And I was like, yeah, I can understand where you're coming from, but like, the whole like the empathetic thing, like, they can definitely do it. But it was interesting, like how, we all have this thing too.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
100%. I would agree with that, what that girl said, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, I usually try to be like more open-minded, but I do 100% agree where you're coming from too. Because like if I'm trying to get advice from somebody personally because of what I already do, I'm
Yeah.
like, you better be way above
Yeah.
what I could do. Right? Like that's the whole point. You have
Yeah.
to have something that I don't know.
Yeah.
um Not saying that I know everything, but like when you're at like a certain level of having lived through all this like different types of trauma, and then you're like doing all these other things, you want somebody who knows that, gets it, and knows how to get you out of it or help you
Ex-
through it.
exactly. 100%. I
Yeah.
agree with you. It's good.
uh, yeah. So why don't you tell me a little bit about what you do now, because that sounded really interesting.
Yeah. So in my search for
Mm-hmm.
happiness in a very unmanageable toxic relationship, I started
Yeah.
diving deep into personal health.
Mm-hmm.
Personal growth.
Okay.
4 years before I left the relationship. Yeah, something like that. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Yeah, like 4 or 5 years before I left the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just reading every book. I was reading every book on finances, personal power, finding your voice,
Mm.
confidence, money, wealth management, all of the issues that I was having. Like I
Mm-hmm.
was a mess. Because of me. Like I
Mm.
didn't read. I didn't look for advice. I was just in this
Mm.
cycle of victimhood of woe is
Right.
me and I'm never going to get
Yeah.
out and it's all his fault and I'm
Mhm.
trapped and I'm in a prison and all of these excuses. And then one day I just woke up. Actually, what happened is hearing him tell me over and over and over again, the person with all the money has all the power,
Mm.
or the person who
Interesting.
makes all the money makes all the rules. After
Right.
hearing that like 3,000 times, I one day
Mhm.
was like, wait a minute. Does that mean that if I have money, I have power? Does that mean
Mm.
that if I have money, I can make rules? Like, is that a
Right.
rule for everybody? And it just like a light bulb went off in my head, and I just went face first into everything.
Mm.
Got certified, saw Tony Robbins, did Landmark, which I
Nice.
don't know if you know about Landmark. I
Yeah,
did
yeah, I
the
know about
gratitude
Landmark.
program.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I dove headfirst into all this stuff, and I opened up a company. First called, it's changed names several times. It was Living
Mhm.
Fabulously, then it was Pure Aspirations, but now 8 years going, it's Human Better 365. And the whole thing is a human transformation company. The foundation of it is time management, organization, minimalization. I believe that every issue, every worry, every struggle that every human being has on the face of the planet is because of a lack of time management and a lack
Mm.
of organization. Everything. I don't care what you tell me. That's what it is, because we're not putting the time into trying to fix it, right? Even my
Yeah.
situation in a toxic relationship, it was a lack of time management. I was spending so
Yeah.
much time doing all these other things that had nothing to do with my problem. If I would have
Right.
sat and read, if I would have Googled up something, if I
Mhm.
would have done things, paid attention
Mhm.
to what my issues were and tried to resolve it, try to do some problem solving, taking
Yeah.
some time to do that, I could have gotten out of it a lot sooner.
Mhm.
So that's the basis of the company, and we work in sobriety a lot. I'm sober 16
Mm.
years. I
Oh,
work with
congratulations.
narcissistic abuse. I have a program called How to Leave Your Spouse in 365 Days, which is my
Mm.
blueprint. I teach how to not procrastinate, time management,
Mhm.
and all the things that go along with it. So, there's a whole slew. I'm slowly creating a curriculum or a university for how to do things better, because our churches aren't teaching us everything. Our schools aren't
Right.
teaching us everything. Our
Mhm.
parents aren't teaching us everything. There's things that you don't know. There's things that I didn't know. And we're learning, right? Like every time you do
Yeah.
this podcast, you're learning. You're like, whoa, what you
Yeah.
learn little nuggets here and little stuff that no one
Mhm.
told you ever.
Yeah.
And we're adults. So how did this
Mhm.
happen?
Right.
So that's what the university is. It is encompassing everything that we don't know and everything that you should know.
I love that.
Thank you.
Especially because I feel like time management is so underrated.
Yes.
And that is one of my biggest things. And so like my work, like the work, I'm very careful. or at least I try to be very mindful of the words that come out of my mouth. I never say things like I am busy anymore, or I haven't been saying that for years, you know. And I feel like there's that constant like busyness that everybody loves to talk about, and yet like they're always talking about how they don't have time for things when they actually do. They
Yeah.
just suck at time management, right? Like,
Yes.
so yeah, you are totally talking to the same. Like
Yes.
I am all about time management, time efficiency, optimization. Like those are all my jams. So I'm so glad that you offer something like this, because I do think that when people start to recognize what time management is and how massively it impacts your life,
100%.
it's a game changer. It is
Yep.
an absolute game changer, you
Yep.
know? And it's the whole concept too of just constantly using that as an excuse. I'm too busy to do this. I'm too busy to do that. And then people will look at me, or even probably you, like you people probably come up to you and are always like, I don't know how you have the time. I
Yes.
don't know how you do that. And I'm like, I'm a person. I'm not an alien. It's because I have skills and I have things that I've set in place in my life,
Yeah.
right? I know exactly how many hours I have as a day in the day. I am human.
Yeah.
And like I learn how to do things and people don't get it. And I'm like, it's such a simple and yet such a difficult idea to grasp for so many people.
Yeah.
So I love it. I love that you're offering this.
Thank you.
I hope you all go check the website out. I will have it on the show notes as well. But yeah, that is fantastic. I feel like there needs to be more and more people who like teach time management and like optimization, like
Yeah.
my whole life it's all about how can I do less? Like, like how can I do it in less amount of time?
That's the
And
whole thing.
cuz
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Less amount
and
of time.
time is so sacred. I don't think people realize that time is our biggest asset in our
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
It's
It's
the
one of
most
the
valuable thing.
I love that you're saying that. But it's one of the very first exercises that I do with my clients is I sit down
Mm,
and I have them do the mathematical problem to find out how many days they have left. And they're
mm,
always super baffled. Like I'm about to be 40 years old.
mhm.
So average lifespan is like 72 or something. So I always tell them to round up to 80.
Mhm.
We have about 40 years left, which that sounds like a pretty long time. But when you multiply that by 365, I have
Yeah.
about 14,000 days left.
Mm.
That's it.
Yeah.
14,000 days. Like
Yeah.
imagine if you had $14,000 left.
Right.
That's it for
Yeah.
the rest.
Mhm.
That's crazy. Like how is there only
Yeah.
14,000
But
days
also,
left?
then you start like tracking, because for me, sleep hygiene is another thing that's like really important to me now
Yeah.
after all the stuff that I've been through. Like, I really try hard to have like a solid 9 hours of sleep because I've noticed 8 doesn't work for me.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, like, I really try hard to get 9. It's not every day, but like when you start subtracting the hours you sleep, the hours
Exactly.
that and then
Yeah.
yeah, it's really interesting. And I love that you talk about having this like calculation done, because for me, because of where I was with my husband, like it was a slap in the face because we lived our life like a lot of other people. I'm sure some of you who are listening will understand this, where you kind of put your life on hold, right? Like you're still living your life, but you're pushing all these things you want to do, right? You want to try all on hold because you have to work, you
Yeah.
have to make money, you have to do this, you have to do that. And then you'll get to a point where you get to something like pretty catastrophic, and then you're like, oh my god, what have I done? And that's what happened with me and my husband. I was like, I've been wanting to travel for years. We met traveling, we met like in Spain, right?
Wow.
Like, and yeah, but funny enough, we lived only 15 minutes away from each other in our hometown, but we met in Spain, right? Because it was like this weird like college trip, and we never met each other until we got there. But we both love traveling, and we couldn't because it was always, oh, I don't have enough time,
Yeah.
I don't have enough money, yada yada. And then like when your money gets cut off, you're like, oh crap, like I really don't have, this is what no money is, right?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
yeah, like, and I have friends who do that all the time. They always talk about how broke they are, but they make money. Like I know they make money because they do like you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so it's like even that, or the fact that like when he got sick, I was like I felt like time was so wasted. All these years of just complaining and, the whole playing the victim, like, woe was me, licking my wounds that I didn't make
Yes.
enough. And, all this. So we couldn't go traveling. We couldn't do this. We couldn't do that. And I was like, I put my foot down and I was like, you know what? I'm going to promise myself and my family, we're going to go travel somewhere. Doesn't even matter if it means it's 2 hours away. We're going to go somewhere every 2 to 3 months. And so far we've done it.
Wow.
As soon as he was like able to, and we were okay, we've been to like, well, of course this all happened during the pandemic,
Oh,
but
yeah.
once things opened up, we went to Salem for Halloween, and we went to Connecticut, we went to New York, and then we went to, New Jersey and New York are my hometown, so that's like kind of a given, but we still went.
Yeah.
We went to Miami, we went to Key West, and now, so yeah, like, and we're planning a big trip to Korea soon, eventually, once their quarantine stuff goes away. But yeah, like, I was like, I have to. And once you start, like, when you shift your thinking like that, it's huge, don't you think?
Yeah.
Like, have you noticed for you too, right? Like, it's
I agree.
humongous.
Yeah, I agree with you
Yeah.
100%. And I think that is kind of going back to what you were saying about the therapist. Like, until you've been through something, it's really hard to even understand. Like, you said it yourself. You've been aware of time management and optimization for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
But then all of a sudden this thing happened,
Yes.
and now you're even more aware of it.
Yes.
See,
Yes.
but like, we're living our life, we're thinking, and I'm guilty of this too. We're thinking we're living the best, but there's always areas in which we should be improving.
Always, yes.
And that's the issue with the therapist. It's like, until you've gone through something, I don't care what it is, you're not viewing life as big, or as I don't know what word I'm looking for, but it's different. Like, you've been through something, I've been through something, so we have that little bit of trauma that we can kind of feed off of each other and understand. If you haven't been through anything, you're just kind of like listening and nodding your head.
That's true. Yeah.
Versus like, I get it, girl. Yes.
Yeah.
Right? There's a total difference between that.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally understand what you mean by that. Man, this was like one of our longest episodes because it's been one of the best for me. I had such a blast. I'm so glad you came on.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much. And so, real quick, once again, can you tell everybody where they can find you?
Yeah, so I just usually send everyone to my like main website, which is sabrinavictoria.com. So my name is Sabrina Victoria, and then .com, and all my social media and all the stuff and the companies that I run, everything's there.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on our show today.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you did.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a great tool for a lot of people, to know like kind of what you went through, but also how you got out of it. I think that's huge. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on our show, and thank you all so much for listening. We will check back in with you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Do you have a bad boss experience you'd like to share with us? Visit our website, thebadbossjournal.com, to submit your story. You can also support our show by checking out our merch and more on our website. Thank you so much for listening to The Bad Boss Journal.